Between 1884 and 1919, Africans fought German colonial rule on the continent. In the west, east and southwest. For over 30 years, Africans resisted racist and exploitative treatment by the Germans.
Cameroonian society is totally traumatized by its colonial history.
So it would be hypocrisy if we could forget their sacrifice.
Even though it's a very ugly history, we need to preserve it and people need to learn from it.
These three activists are convinced important lessons can be learned from this violent shared history with Germany. Marilyn Douala Mangabel has made it her mission to shed light on the German colonial period in Cameroon. Her organization, Douala Art, promotes an artistic exploration of the subject.
Cameroonian society is totally traumatized by its colonial history. It was a period of great rupture and violence against traditions. It introduced a completely new mode of being, politically, administratively, religiously, spiritually, economically and in society. German colonial rule created modern-day Cameroon. And it was at the Berlin Conference that, little by little, the name Cameroon emerged to define a territory.
Hamburg-based merchants were the drivers of colonialism in Cameroon. They were already there when Consul General Gustav Nachtigal arrived in 1884 to sign treaties with leaders of the coastal elite, the Aqua and Douala families. Adolf Wörmann, together with other merchants like Janssen and Tormalen, had lobbied Chancellor Otto von Bismarck to acquire German colonies. At the Berlin Conference in 1884 to 85, European leaders carved up the African continent into European colonies. Cameroonian coastal elites signed so-called protection treaties to secure their own trading interests. But the Germans interpreted those treaties as a transfer of control from coastal elites to Germany. In Namibia, it was German merchant Adolf Lüderitz who began acquiring land through intermediaries. Protection treaties, often misleading or signed under duress, started the transition of land ownership from indigenous people to Germans. Here in southwest Africa, Germans came not only to exploit, but to settle. In Tanzania, the center of German colonial history is found in the coastal city of Dar es Salaam. Bernard Ntahondi is part of an initiative that saved an important historic building here, the old Boma, from demolition.
So the building at the back is where the city of Dar es Salaam started. Built in 1860 by Sultan of Zanzibar and later used by the Germans for administration. Started to be used for administration from 1887 to 1903. And from here, this is where all the German colonial administration expanded.
The natural harbour at Dar es Salaam convinced the German colonial administrators to move their headquarters here from Bagamoyo in 1891. It was Karl Peters who had long before dreamt of a grand East African empire for Germany. He had signed the first few so-called protection treaties with local leaders even before getting the backing of then-Chancellor Otto von Bismarck. But coastal communities and the Zanzibari Sultan resisted Germany's attempt to seize lucrative trade routes, leading to the Abushiri insurrection in 1888. In response, Germany sent Hermann von Wissmann to form a Schutztruppe or protection force using mostly African mercenaries or Askaris and German officers. A deal with the British Empire followed. German East Africa included modern-day Burundi and Rwanda and reached all the way up to Lake Victoria. In Namibia, the colony was 835,000 square kilometers, roughly 1.5 times the size of the German Empire at the time. Local leaders like Hendrik Witbooi and later Samuel Herero initially tried to cooperate with the German colonial administration, but local Nama and Herero groups suffered increasing pressure from Germany's imperial expansion. In Cameroon, German colonial officers formed a police corps too, again mostly composed of men from other African countries. They started a brutal reign and conducted expeditions to the hinterlands, subjugating local people and stealing resources, especially palm oil. In Togo too, which Germany promoted as a model colony, violent and racist rule was not random, but rather systematically imposed. In East Africa, Karl Peters, who governed in the Kilimanjaro region for some years, gained notoriety for arbitrary executions of locals who resisted German rule. The German Protection Force was feared for its practices of hanging leaders publicly, raiding villages, and burning lands. During this time, bones or skulls of victims were shipped to Germany for research into scientific racism. Germany introduced punishing taxation and forced indigenous people to build infrastructure to extract African wealth for Germany. In East Africa, this led to the Maji War, in which several different groups united and fought German colonialism. It lasted from 1905 to 1907. It is estimated to have cost 300,000 lives and decimated communities.
They lost their life because, they wanted to protect their communities, which are our communities today. They wanted to protect the resources, they wanted to protect land and everything. So it would be hypocrisy if we could forget their sacrifice. It's very important for us as a young generation to also know our own history to better determine the future.
In Namibia, in around 1900, German colonialists tried to marginalize the Nama and Over Herero. More conflicts followed, and in 1904, war broke out between Germany and the Over Herero, culminating in the decisive Battle of Waterberg. German General Lothar von Trotha issued his extermination order, which spared no Over Herero found in German-occupied territory. Men, women and children were forced into the waterless Omaheke Desert, where many of them died of thirst and starvation. The remaining Over Herero and Nama people were put into concentration camps in Swakopmund and Shark Island near Lüderitz. The concentration camps were part of a genocidal system that was set in place during German colonial rule in Namibia. Today in Swakopmund, a well-maintained graveyard for German soldiers is to be found near a much bigger gravesite where Herero and Nama victims are buried. In 2015, Laidlaw Peringanda started teaching about the cruelties that happened here. His Swakopmund Genocide Museum is small, but full of lessons.
Most of the prisoners that wanted to run away, their heads were decapitated in Swakopmund. And then women were forced to boil their heads, And then they were taking off the skin of pieces of broken glasses. So that is a very famous postcard of soldiers picking skulls. It was sold during the genocide in Germany. Mm-hmm. So this skull 787 you see here, mm-hmm. It came from Germany, around 52 skulls. So most of these skulls are still in Germany.
Laidlaw is a descendant of an Over Herero leader. His grandmother suffered and survived the appalling conditions in Swakopmund. Until not so long ago, this burial ground was not even properly cordoned off. People walked on it, children played on it. Laidlaw Peringanda put up a fight for the site to be preserved and remembered.
And sometimes when the wind blows, human remains are always coming out. And it's a very special place to me, and I always come here to give homage to our people. And most of our people were buried in shallow graves here. And that's why I'm very much attached to this place, and I'm making sure that it's been restored every 4 times per year.
When the camps were closed down in 1908, the remaining Nama and Herero communities were left in a very fragile and vulnerable state. Meanwhile, in Cameroon, the local elites had sent their children to be educated in Germany, among them young Rudolf Mangabell, Maria Mandesi Bell, and Mpundu Akwa. In 1914, Rudolf Mangabell, king of the Douala, formally protested against colonial cruelties at the German parliament and demanded equality. His great-granddaughter, Marilyn Douala Mangabell, is honoring his legacy today.
He was the victim of a false trial, right here, in this place. All the other resistance fighters in Cameroon, and there were many, disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Rudolf Douala Mangabell and Adolf Ngozo Din were assassinated right over here.
The Germans left the bodies there for 3 days as deterrence. But instead of being deterred, many Cameroonians sided with the Allies and turned against the Germans when the First World War broke out in 1914. After the war ended, Cameroon was divided into British and French colonies. Independence was attained in 1960, and the country unified a year later. But the division created conflicts between Anglophone and Francophone regions, which are still ongoing. In German East Africa, German Askari units under Paul-Fronleiter Vorbeck fought with Allied British and Belgian soldiers. A large number of African soldiers died here. The fighting only stopped in 1918 after the war in Europe ended. Tanganyika became a British mandate. Rwanda and Burundi came under Belgian rule. Independence was attained in 1961 and 1962. In Namibia, during World War I, South African troops had expelled the German colonial administration by 1915. However, many settlers stayed. Though Laidlaw Peringanda is facing a lot of adversities, he's optimistic that a better future is possible.
When we are restoring the grave, we are having few German Namibians, young people that are helping us. So I'm pretty much sure that, we are moving in the right direction, that we need to preserve the history from both sides. It's part of our history, even though it's a very ugly history. We need to preserve it, and people need to learn from it.
These three are putting up a fight against forgetting these painful memories, so they can serve as powerful memorials and educational spaces for present and future generations.